All right, everybody, I am here at Sunset Zoo with the amazing zookeeper, Miss Susie, and she is super passionate about pollinator gardens, and she's going to share with you how this can work at your school. So tell us all about pollinator gardens.
Hey everybody, as Rachel said, I'm Susie, and I'm going to talk to you guys today about why pollinator gardens are important and why we can start implementing them at our schools and how to create your own pollinator garden. So first thing to note is that pollinators are the backbone to many healthy ecosystems. They need more natural areas now more than ever, so this is a great opportunity to create wildflower-rich habitats, which are the most significant action we can take to help our pollinator friends. Pollinator gardens can also help students how to be good stewards to our environment. And that can help them learn if we take care of the land, then the land will take care of us. And as if that stuff isn't cool enough, pollinator gardens are also an all-encompassing STEAM tool that can help promote ecological and sustainability studies. So aside from all these things, why are native pollinator gardens important? They also serve as micro wildlife refuges in our schoolyards and our backyards. Local wildlife need food and shelter to survive and reproduce. And these native pollinator gardens provide all of these essential services. So now I want to go into how to set up your own pollinator garden. So as you guys can see here, we have multiple pollinator gardens set up throughout the zoo, and we have them all placed pretty close together, which is something that I'm going to revisit kind of through our setting up procedures. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is we are going to want to plan our garden. So our garden can range from a container garden that's a few feet wide on a balcony, or maybe in somebody's backyard if they just have a small area, or it can range all the way to a field of natural habitat. So really it's your choice. However, the larger the garden, the more beneficial it's going to be for both the pollinators and our local wildlife. But don't worry, if you don't have a giant area to convert into native pollinator habitat, what you do create, the pollinators and the wildlife will find, and they will come. So you want to find a location with little to no pre-existing root competition from shrubs and trees. If it's possible, like what we have over here, you want to place your pollinator garden next to a water source. So right here, right now the water's not flowing, but we do have this water source that's almost always flowing, but we're getting ready to clean our pond today. But if you don't have a water source to place nearby, you can put out a bird bath or even a small tray on the ground, and that will be extremely beneficial for both the wildlife and the pollinators. And again, if possible, and don't fret if it's not, you would like to place your pollinator garden next to other natural areas. So something else that we want to consider when we're planning our garden is how much sunlight does that area get? So full sun is considered 6 or more hours during the day. Part sun is 3 to 6 hours, and part shade is going to be 3 or less hours a day. And full shade is fully shaded throughout the day, which all of these sunlight options, we do have plants that we can plant, but you are gonna have the largest diversity of plants if you plant somewhere that is full sun. And you want to consider the moisture levels. So does this area does it hold water, or is it a drier area? So these are something that we need to consider creating our garden, but also considering the plants that we're going to be able to plant. And another thing is we need to consider the pre-existing wildlife. So are deer and rabbits common in the area? If so, we would like to plant plants that are deer or rabbit resistant, or we can use an organic deterrent or fencing, or you can just use regular fencing. So these are all things to consider when you're planning your garden. So the next step is we want to identify the type of soils. In Manhattan, typically our soil is more clay, with low organic material. And so a really good way to look at the exact spot that you're wanting to create your garden is you can look on the Natural Resource Conservation Service soil map to identify the soil type and the specific location. But if you want to have an exact result, I recommend reaching out to the Riley County Extension Office. This is an inexpensive tool to use and send a soil sample to that will give you exact results and help you know how to improve the soil conditions from professionals. So the next step is you want to make your garden bed. If there's grass, which is also known as turf, existing in that location, you want to get rid of it because grass is going to outcompete the flowers or whatever you decide to plant there. So the easiest option, but it usually takes a season, is you can cover with 2 to 3 layers of cardboard, and that will typically kill the grass over a season. Another option would be to cover with a painter's tarp, a clear painter's tarp, and then cover that for a season. And that uses solar radiation to burn up the grass. And again, that takes about a season. Probably the quickest way to convert an area that has existing turf to a garden is to actually dig up the top layer, dig up the turf, and then you're gonna have to probably weed more often, resprouting grass, but that is the quickest option. But it is a little more work intensive than the former two that I talked about. So once you've already gotten rid of the turf, then you want to till the soil. And I typically use a rototiller. That's the easiest way to do it. And once you've tilled the soil, you want to till typically 3 to 4 inches deep, or however deep you can till, depending on your soil type. So then you want to prepare your soil with organic material. So what we use here at the zoo is partially composted bark and compost from the Riley County Transfer Station. And for for a ton, which is 2,000 pounds of compost, it's about $20. So it's very cost effective and you know exactly what you're getting. We do not recommend using topsoil from garden centers because it's not regulated. You don't actually know what you're getting. And so a 50-50 blend of high and low fertility compost is ideal. So high fertility would be compost or partially composted manure, and low fertility is partially composted bark. And so that 50-50 ratio is what we use here at the zoo and what you get from the transfer station. So then you want to spread that organic material over your tilled garden. You want to spread it about 2 to 3 inches deep, and then you want to till it again. So till that organic material into the soil. The next step, and I think the most fun and my favorite step, is selecting the plants. So you want to choose the right plant for the right location. And one of the most important things is you want to choose native plants to your area. And I have posted on the Sunset Zoo website under our conservation tab and then local efforts. I've created a plant list of all the native plants in Northeast Kansas. And then I've also listed local nurseries and seed sources that you can get these plants from. So if you're looking for where to find these plants or which plants, that's a really good resource. So if you choose native plants, they are adapted to our local habitat and climate, and then also water. So they are going to be the most sustainable plants that you're going to find. So perennials are plants that come back every year, and annuals are plants that die, go to seed, and then they resprout from seeds the following year. Both are great. It's just those are the main differences between annuals and perennials for herbaceous plants. So when you're buying plants at a nursery or obtaining seeds, you want to be sure and find out the botanical name, which is also known as the scientific name, so the genus and the species, just to make sure that you're not getting a cultivar, which is also known as a hybrid. So these plants don't have as much genetic diversity as their native cousins that we would find out in the prairie, and they typically all bloom at once, and they're just not as beneficial to pollinators as the actual heirloom native plants. So you want to select a variety of plants that bloom throughout the season, as well as host plants, which are basically nurseries for the larvae for different pollinators. And then you want to select protective plants. So plants such as grasses or stocky or woody plants that provide good cover during the winter and the heat of the summer. So another thing that you want to consider, and I'm going to walk over here and show it to you, is you want to consider the growing habits of plants. So these plants right here are asters, and these over here are goldenrod that haven't sprouted yet. And typically asters and goldenrods are plants that if you don't cut them back every year, they're gonna spread and potentially outcompete the other plants that they're planted with. So that's something that you need to consider, is you need to consider the plant's growing habits. And because these plants do spread a lot, that does not mean that you shouldn't plant them. It just means that they might need a little more care than other plants that aren't as vivacious. So another thing that you want to do for aesthetic reasons, but also for pollinators foraging, it kind of eases their foraging, is you want to create massings. So you want to plant 3 to 4 of the same plant in groups. And so that helps the pollinators forage easier, but it also makes your garden look really nice. And another thing is you want to disperse bloom and color throughout your gardens. It adds diversity, but it also helps the pollinators. So a few things to consider as we wrap up how to create your pollinator garden is, once you start your pollinator garden, you're going to have to water it through the dry season for the first year. But typically once you get through that first year, then you don't need to water your garden anymore, because again, these plants are adapted for your local climate. You're gonna wanna weed your garden for about 20 minutes every week, and that includes potentially cutting back some of the plants that have spread a little more than the others if they're trying to choke out another plant. And then in the spring, you wanna cut back all of the dead materials on your plants, but it's really important that you leave all of that stuff during the winter time, because there are a lot of birds that will eat the seeds, and it also provides a really good overwintering habitat for our pollinators and our wildlife. And lastly, but potentially the most important part about creating a native pollinator garden, is you do not want to use any chemicals. You don't want to use any herbicides, you don't want to use any pesticides, and no chemical fertilizers. That's why we use the compost. So now that we've talked about why pollinator gardens are important and how to create your own pollinator garden, I want to leave you guys with kind of taking a look at the beauty and kind of how informal pollinator gardens can look. But it's about kind of shifting your perspective of what a garden should look like. So this is what potentially our prairies looked like before we started planting a lot of grass and all of that kind of stuff. But thank you guys for tuning in, and I look forward to working with you on projects in the future.
Awesome. And quick question, Susie. If someone has a school that's not in Northeast Kansas, how would you recommend them finding soil, or how would you find them or recommend them finding plants for their area?
Oh, great question. So again, I would definitely, for the soil type, I would definitely recommend looking at the Natural Resource Conservation Society and Conservation Service, soil map, and that will show you what your soil type is. And then each county should have their own research and extension office that you can send a soil sample to. And again, that will help you give an exact soil type, and then ways that you can improve that soil type, if it's high or low in organic material, high or low in clay or sand. And then for the plants, I personally love the Kansas wildflower page, and then also the Xerxes Society. They have some really good materials on local nurseries and things like that. And then also, again, going back to your county research and extension office, that would also be a really good resource to reach out to see if they have any connections to local nurseries or seed providers.
Yeah, and maybe they would donate some of those things to schools for free.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, thank you, Susie.
Yep.